Well, hello, I'm Sandra Harding, the Vice-Chancellor and President of James Cook University, and it's my pleasure to say a little bit about the naming of the Eddie Koiki Mabo Library in Townsville. Now, this is a personal story, and I'll tell it from my own perspective if you don't mind. This is what happened. On my very first day as Vice-Chancellor of James Cook University, I was walking through the campus in Townsville, and I walked past what appeared to be a tombstone, and on that tombstone was a bas-relief image of Eddie Koiki Mabo. And of course, I knew who Eddie Koiki Mabo was, and I'd heard and obviously knew about that great land rights decision, that High Court decision, which secured land rights for Indigenous peoples in Australia in an emphatic way. But I had no idea why this tombstone would be on our campus. So I continued on my way and then came back to my office and began a conversation. And over the next week or so, I found out this most remarkable story. And it was a story that it seemed to me, as the university, we should celebrate rather more and should be known publicly rather more. And I always thought of myself as someone who was relatively informed on these matters, but I had no idea of the integral role that James Cook University played in that great historic feat of land rights in the Mabo decision. And so the story that I heard was this, that Eddie Koiki Mabo was a gardener at our university. And one day he was having lunch with two of our academics, Henry Reynolds and Noel Luce. And over that lunch in the early 70s, the issue of land ownership and Indigenous land ownership arose. And Eddie Koiki Mabo was stunned to find out that the land on Mer Island actually didn't belong to his family. And when Henry and Noel explained to him, and both of them have said to me in their own way that they looked at each other to see who was going to tell him that it wasn't his land. When they did tell him, he was stunned, and he replied that he knew 15 or 16 generations of land ownership on Murray Island. There were maps. How could it be that this land didn't belong to him, to his people? Ultimately, he was a very clever man, of course. He had a fine reputation involved in schooling in Townsville, as well as, of course, working on our campus. He ended up using the resources of our library in order to understand more about this really bizarre idea that somehow or other the land did not belong to his people. And he read law and he read anthropology, and I remember being told that in some of the books that he had a look at and some of the early images that we had in the library contained images of people who he had known or had known of, some of his forebears. And as a result of that, and as a result of, I guess, the raising of consciousness on the campus itself, in 1981, a land rights conference was held, and I believe it was one of the first, certainly in Queensland, if not in the nation. And it was held involving the JCU Student Association, and every year I say to the incoming executive of the Student Association, this is something they should be immensely proud of. So the JCU Student Association plus the university overall held a land rights conference, and his was one of the cases that ended up being discussed at that particular land rights conference. A number of lawyers came from down south to attend that land rights conference, and ultimately it was determined off the back of that his case would be one of those that would go through to the High Court to challenge this ridiculous notion, really, of terra nullius, and to do that in law. And ultimately, of course, that was in the early 80s. Ultimately, it wasn't until 1992 when that historic decision was made. So getting back to the library and why the naming of the library, of course, Eddie Koiki Mabo had a strong, therefore, connection with the university overall. But what's more, in order to both raise his own consciousness and reinforce his own understanding of land rights and the circumstances, he used the resources of our library, the Eddie Koiki Mabo Library, in order to do that. And when I found this story out, fully fledged story, I thought it was just the most marvellous story, and it was one that needed to be shared more widely. And I remember speaking to the Chancellor of the day, Lieutenant General John Gray, who's a fantastic Chancellor and a wonderful man. And I said to him at the time, we need to do something in this. We have to recognise physically this connection, this amazing connection that the university has with this historical story, this amazing story. And he was the one who came up with the idea as we talked it through with, well, why don't we name the library for Eddie Koiki Mabo? And it was just perfect. It was the perfect suggestion. And so that is indeed what we did. And I remember the day when the library was named, and that was in May 2008, the 21st of May 2008. And we had a ceremony at the front of the library. We had members of the Mabo family there, including Benita Mabo, now the late Dr. Benita Mabo, as far as we're concerned, having received an honorary doctorate from our university for her own personal wonderful efforts in terms of land rights and the rights of Indigenous peoples. I remember she was there. Jenny Macklin was the minister of the day. Jenny Macklin came and did the official blessing of the library, as it were, and we officially named the library that day for Eddie Koiki Mabo. And on that day, we had the university staff and many students amassed at the front of the library for the grand reveal of the name. And it was one of those moments, one of those powerful community moments when there was a sense of unity of purpose and an understanding and a relief that we had recognised this amazing event and the university's connection to it in this very powerful way. And when you think about the power of this moment, you think about the power of that decision. It isn't very often that history is changed. History is history. It's happened. But on the date, when the High Court confirmed Indigenous land rights, history was changed. What we thought to be true in Australian history was shown to be shallow and not true. It was such an amazing event. And even today, as I walk through the doors of the Eddie Koiki Mabo Library, and I did just the other day again, there's a humility that I feel walking through the library about the immense purpose that was transacted in that library, the power of knowledge, the importance of our university, and the fact that Australian history was changed by virtue of what this man and his community did, but also by virtue of what the university supported. To me, it's a very humbling experience and quite a wonderful one. It is critical that we maintain and continue to celebrate the connection between James Cook University and Eddie Koiki Mabo and land rights and Indigenous rights overall. It's imperative that we do that, and one way we do that is by continuing to celebrate the Eddie Koiki Mabo Library. Thank you.